Good morning, my dear friends. It is my pleasure to meet you again. In fact, we should be thankful to God for keeping us safe for such a long time. And still, we all will pray to continue to bless us so that we will be safe throughout this pandemic, also throughout our life. Let's start this lesson. The last video of this lesson, we have discussing about the origin and evolution of life and what are the evidences. So in that, one of the evidence was Archaeopteryx, the fossil bird. So fossils are giving a good quantity and quality of light towards the study of and classification of the plants as well as the animals. Let's look into the concept of fossils little more in detail in this video. The first term we are going to discuss is paleobotany. That means paleontology and botany. Paleontology is the study of fossils and botany is the study of plants. So when we combine together, we can say that the fossils of plant remains, when we study about that one, we call them as paleobotany. Whenever we say about a fossil of a plant, it doesn't mean that the entire plant as such is become a fossil. No, most of the case that is not happening. Only part of the plant, maybe a stem or a leaf or a fruit, something like that may be preserved. No, but getting a fossil of an entire plant as such is a very rare case. And study about this paleobotany will help us to learn more about the plant classification, to understand the evolution of plants. This helps to learn more about the phylogeny of the plant. Also, this study of fossils in plants that will give a more understanding for the descriptive learning of anatomy, plant anatomy. These are the general uses of learning about the fossils in the case of plants. Caspar Maria von Steenberg, he had a museum at Prague, a location in Europe. He is known as the father of paleobotany. Also a scientist named Birbal Sahni. He is the father of Indian paleobotany. The next topic we will discuss little more detail about how this fossilization happened. Fossilization means the process of forming the fossils. Fossilization can happen in mainly 5 methods. The first method is petrifaction. In this type of fossilization, the minerals like silica and all, they will slowly penetrate into the dead organism. Slowly, by replacing all those things, silica will make a mold of the entire dead organism. The next method is mold and cast. Let's say these dead organisms are buried deep underground water will remove all the body contents, leaving a hollow part. That will, in later stages, that will reveal an outer structure of the entire organism. Of course, in this you cannot get the impression of the internal organs, but the entire mold, you can see that how the entire structure was. This is called mold and cast. In this way also fossils can be formed. The next method is preservation. In this method, the original body part itself can be preserved in the ice for many years, or in amber, the plant sap, if it is inside, it will be preserved for a long time. If you look at the remainings of living organism in Arctic and Antarctic, in such a cold climate, that will remain there itself for thousands of years. So this is a kind of methodology in formation of fossils. The next method is compression, the formation of fossils. In this method, the dead organisms, their body will go to the bottom of the sea and the sedimentary part will be formed around it. The mud, all these things will settle on it, and due to huge compression, these sediments will be keep on added layer by layer for a long time. And after a long time of this process, sedimentation keeps happening, the fossils will be formed at the bottom of the sea. The last method of formation of fossils is infiltration or replacement. The precipitation of minerals will take place and slowly it will penetrate into the cell wall of the plant remains. And after some time, these minerals will slowly replace the molecules which are present in the cell wall and other part of the plant organs. This happens in the case of silica, calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate. At the end of this, the hard part of the plant organs will be dissolved and will be replaced by these minerals. So after a long time when we find this, you can see the exact copy of the plant but made up of silica or magnesium carbonate or calcium carbonate, like that. This type of mineral fossil formation is called infiltration or replacement method. These are the methods how the fossils are formed. We have some organisms that we call them as living fossils because they show the characters of or appearance of the fossils, and the extinct characters of particular species is still shown by Ginkgo biloba, and that is called a living fossil. If you look at the aspects in this unit 19 part 2, we will start with the paleobotany. We have heard paleontology and botany, we know that. Paleontology means study of fossils, botany means study of plants. That means the fossils remaining of plant, when we study that, it is called paleobotany, plant fossils studies. And coming to the objectives, what is the use of learning paleobotany is to learn phylogeny and evolution of that particular species, and we will learn the history of that particular plant, and this will help the easy classification of plants. Also, this will help us in the anatomical studies of plants. Coming to the people who contributed well for this paleobotany internationally, Caspar Maria von Sternberg, a European scientist, and he placed a national museum in Prague, Europe, and he is called as father of paleobotany. Next one, coming to India, Birbal Sahani is called as the father of Indian paleobotany. Reason is he has made significant studies in Paleozoic ferns and fossil plants in the Gondwana formations. So by these contributions, he is called as the father of Indian paleobotany. The next thing we are going to discuss is the fossilization. That means the process of formation of fossils. So this actually starts when the organism dies, and the different types of fossilization is, the first one is petrifaction. That means minerals will go and replace the original tissues. Example, silica and all these minerals can go and replace the internal tissues, and this type of fossils are formed in the case of hard things of wood and bones in the case of animals. And the second type of fossilization is mold and cast. That means mold means a replica, a copy of that. A copy of that, a replica will be preserved of plant or animal. Since this is formed only the replica, we get the details only of the outside part of that particular animal, plant or animal. We don't get any details of internal because it's just a mold. So there won't be any differentiation inside, only the outside details alone we can get from this type of fossilizations. Next one is preservation. In this type of method, original organism itself will be preserved. Let's say there is a dead organism which is preserved, fall on ice in Arctic or Antarctic. These animals or plant remaining will remain as such, it won't decay due to the extreme minus temperature. Or in the amber or the tree sap, this will prevent the microbial contamination, everything will be prevented. So this organism, plant or animal, will be preserved as such for a long time. That is called preservation in ice or amber. In such a way also we get the fossils. Next one is compression. Let's say a dead organism falls in the bottom of the sea covered with so many sediments. After a long time, the quantity of sediment on that particular organism will increase. That will make this huge pressure on that one. that will slowly become into a fossil. That type of fossilization is called compression. Coming to the last one, infiltration and replacement. In this case of replacement, the minerals like silica, calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate and all can penetrate through the cell wall, and slowly it will replace the internal content of the cell, the tissues and the entire organism itself. So in this case we get more details than the other things, and this is happening in the case of infiltration and replacement. In these 5 methods fossilization can happen. First one is petrifaction, mold and cast, preservation, compression and infiltration and replacement method. Of these 5 methods fossilization can occur. So what we have seen now is how the fossils were formed. The next thing you should know is how do we calculate the age of the fossils. Of course, we found a fossil, and what do we do next is to calculate the age of that particular fossil, how long it has been, so that it will be helpful for us for the classification and other things. How do we calculate the age of fossils? That is the next thing we are going to discuss. Of course, these fossils don't have any birth certificate or something like that. We need to calculate the age of it. So radiocarbon method is a method we use to determine the age of the fossils. 2000 years back it was alive. Something like that we will calculate, we will predict with the help of radiocarbon method. Of course, if you look at your textbook, it has given in a 2 small paragraph what is it called carbon dating method. But that small 2 paragraph is not enough for you to learn about what is called carbon method, dating method. So let me go a little detailed than what is given in the textbook, so that it will give you good understanding of what is called radiocarbon dating. Before we start the radiocarbon dating methods, you should have some little more understanding about the carbon. Of course, you have studied that carbon and its compounds and other things in previous classes of 10th standard as well as 9th standard, but still look into those, take it as a revision. That carbon is present in 3 forms mainly. First one is carbon 12 atomic mass, which is 99% of the carbon is carbon 12 only. Carbon 13 is present. These 2 are non-radioactive, and carbon 13 is only 1%, nearly 1%. But one more heavier one, it is carbon 14, is also present in our nature. If you look at the comparison between carbon 12 and carbon 14, the ratio between them is just like 1 C14 will be present for 1 lakh crores of C12. So you can say that this carbon 14 is present in a minute quantity, very minute quantity in the atmosphere. This is the first point you should remember, presence of carbon C12, 13 and 14, where the C14 is radioactive. That is the first point you should remember. Coming to the next point, what makes this carbon 14 possible, radioactive, how they are formed? For this we will go little to the studies from the social, that layers of atmosphere, the lower stratosphere and upper troposphere will have presence of neutrons due to the cosmic rays. These neutrons will go and hit the nitrogen, which is 14 in atomic mass and 7 in atomic number. They will split into, since this neutron come and hit the nitrogen, that will make the carbon and a proton. Okay, in this point of formation of carbon 14, that from the nitrogen 14, the carbon 14 is formed in the atmosphere itself. So in the atmosphere you got C12, C13 and C14. Since this carbon 14 is radioactive, they will tend to lose its energy from the nucleus to become a stable one. And this C14 will lose the energy by losing an electron and an electron antineutrino. And when the carbon 14, the radioactive element, when it loses an electron and an electron antineutrino from this, from its nucleus, that will again go back to nitrogen 14. So let me conclude. Due to the cosmic rays in the atmosphere, the neutrons will be raised. These neutrons will combine with nitrogen, which is abundantly present in the atmosphere, which will make the combination of a neutron with a nitrogen 14 will make the carbon 14 and a proton. This carbon 14 is radioactive. It will be present in the atmosphere. Since it is radioactive, it has to go back to its original place or its a stable place. So to do that, this C14 will lose an electron, also an electron antineutrino from the nucleus, and thus it will lose the energy and it will become a stable atom. Now this time, by losing an electron and a electron antineutrino, this C14 again will become back to nitrogen 14. So this is a happening, keep that in your mind. That is the point. And next thing you should remember is this carbon 14, as soon as it is formed, it will try to combine with the oxygen. So CO, carbon monoxide, will be formed, and immediately one more oxygen will be added. So now you got carbon dioxide, which is radioactive carbon dioxide is present. So far I hope you are clear with that. This radioactive carbon dioxide will be absorbed by the plants to do the photosynthesis. So end of photosynthesis, you know, it will be a molecule called C6H12O6. A glucose will be formed. So now this glucose has a carbon which is 14. That means radioactive. This carbon will be consumed by the plant itself, will live along with that and die, or this plant or plant part will be consumed by the animals. Now the animals got the radioactive carbon inside. And this is the entire process how these animals and plants get the radioactive carbon inside. So far I hope you are clear. When the organism, either plant or animal, when they are alive, they keep on absorbing C14 to their body. But when they die, the atmospheric concentration of C14, when you compare it with a dead body of a plant or animal, the quantity will be keep on reducing, because this C14 is radioactive. They will be keep on releasing the energy outside to become nitrogen. It will be keep on happening. These are the things you should remember. The next point you should remember is T-half. That means half-life of a radioactive element. That is nothing but the time duration taken by a radioactive element to become half of its mass. That means, let's say 1 kilogram of radioactive C14 is present, and how many years after it will become half kg. That is called half-life. Okay, now the situation is you got a fossil in your hand, you want to go for carbon 14 dating method to determine the age of that particular fossil. What can we do with that? And remember that the half-life of carbon 14 is around 5730 years. That means, let's say there is 1 kilogram of carbon 14, after 5730 years that will become half kg due to the radioactive decay. So keep that in your mind. So if you find, for an example, let's take a silly example so that you understand it well. Let the atmosphere has 100 kilograms of C14 present normally, and the same quantity of 100 kilograms of C14 is present in a living big tree. For an example, just silly example, you take it. Now the fossil you got has only 50 kilograms of carbon 14. What is the meaning of it? That fossil is 5730 years old. That is why from 1 kilogram it has become half kilogram. I hope the idea is clear. Now forget the silly example. Now come to the actual point. Let's say one more thing. There is only 1/4 of quantity of C14 is present comparing with the atmospheric quantity of C14. That means that is 11,760 years old. Let's say there is only 1/8 of C14 when you compare with the atmospheric C14. That means that particular fossil is 17,190 years old. W.F. Liffey, the year 1956, he just formulated this, the radiocarbon dating method. And still now we are using this technique. And also remember, apart from this radiocarbon 14, there are other minerals also present in radioactive condition that can also be used, such as radioactive elements of uranium, lead and potassium are also present in the form of just like this carbon dating that can also be evaluated, and half-life is different of that particular elements that will slightly change. Also there is a equation formula used to calculate the half-life of fossils. In that a radioactive decaying constant, a value will be used. That means in a constant value the decaying will be happening. That equation will be shown just behind me. The next thing we are going to discuss is determination of age of fossils. If you look at the content of determination of age of fossils in your textbook, it is a very small quantity only they have given. So in fact I would like to have full understanding of carbon 14 dating method. So how do we determine the age of fossils? The most successful one is carbon dating using radioactive carbon, that is C14. Of course, you have gone through carbon and its compounds and other lessons you have studied about the carbon. Let's look into few more aspects in that. The first one is carbon is most abundantly present in carbon 12 atomic mass, whereas carbon 13 is also present, that means atomic mass 13. These two are non-radioactive, and we have one more carbon which is very rare, but it is in carbon 14. So this one is radioactive. The meaning, this carbon 14 will emit radiation so that it can become a stable atom. This is a highly unstable one, so it will emit radiations outside. That is the first introductory part. Looking at the next point, this C12 is most abundantly present. 99% of the carbon in this entire world is C12, whereas 1% approximately is C13. Now look at that, 99 plus 1, it is 100, but very trace amount. In fact, 1 is to 1.35 to the power into 10 to the power minus 12. Next one we would like to see is the formation of C14, how this C14 is formed. If we look at this lower stratosphere and upper, let's look into the formation of carbon 14 in our atmosphere, the lower stratosphere and upper troposphere. At this location, due to the cosmic rays, the neutrons will be formed. Neutrons, you know that in chemistry, neutrons are the member of a nucleus of an atom. These free neutrons will go and hit the nitrogen molecules which has atomic number 17 and atomic mass 14. This one, when it hit with a neutral, this nitrogen is not radioactive. When they hit this one, there will be a change in the nucleus, that atomic number will be reduced by 1. That means a neutron hits with a nitrogen 14, that will make a C14 and a proton. Proton is also a member of nucleus. So this is how now the C14 is formed in our atmosphere. This is the first thing you should remember. The next one, since it is radioactive, it will emit the radiations from the nucleus and it will lose its energy in order to become a stable one. For that, how does the decay will happen? Simultaneously we will study both. This C14 will go for radioactive decay and it will form the nitrogen which is not radioactive. So nitrogen will convert to C14 and C14 will decay into nitrogen 14 by emitting an electron, also a electron antineutrino along with it. This is you will study in higher classes, but for your understanding I am giving this. So far we have seen the carbon dating and types of carbon molecules, in which one is radioactive and how much it is present and how do they form and how do they decay. These are all introductory part. Before we start actual carbon dating method, You should know this. So after the formation of C14 in the atmosphere, of course they are not stable, they will be immediately will find an oxygen atom to form carbon monoxide. Also it will combine with another oxygen to form carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide will be utilized by plant for the process called photosynthesis. Now the glucose is produced, that is C6H12O6 with the carbon 14 itself. Now you got a radioactive glucose inside. So this plant will have radioactive glucose that contains C14. Now this plant may be eaten by an animal, so this glucose will be transferred to animals. So this is how these animals or plants will have radioactive carbon inside their body. I hope this much things are clear to you. Coming to the next one, if the organism is living, that's the first case, the intake of radioactive C14, also decay which is happening inside their body will be in equilibrium, because C14 is keep on coming from the atmosphere, CO2, photosynthesis, all these things, and the decay also happening. So there will be always an equilibrium between intake and decay of carbon 14 inside a living body. But when this organism will die, what will happen? The intake of C14 will stop, because there is after death there is no more eating. So, but this already some C14s are which is present inside the body, it will be keep decaying. So let me conclude that one. When an organism is alive, the intake in and out of C14 is in equilibrium. So we know how much is present in atmosphere, how much in the body, all are same. But when the organism dies, the intake will stop, only the decaying of radioactive carbon will happen. Now we will look into that particular aspect, and one more you need to know is the half-life of radioactive elements. You could have studied this in chemistry, but still let me rewind this. In the case of carbon 14 alone, life divided by 2, that means let us say a quantity of a radioactive element is 1 kilogram. After certain years or time period, this 1 kilogram will become 500 grams, that means half kg. The time taken to become half of its original mass is called as life, half-life of that particular radioactive material. In the case of C14, the half-life is 5730 years. That means after 5030 years, the original mass of C14 will become into half. And after 11,460 years of time, the C14 will bring to 1/4 of its actual mass. After 17,190 years, this C14 will be only 1/8 of the actual mass. Remaining all will finish decaying and they will convert back into nitrogen. Now, keeping all this in your mind, let's bring to a formula that time of that particular sample we have received is in a logarithm of electrons and ratio between the sample and original. Original means living, the same plant or same content in the atmosphere or the normal living thing, that will be in equilibrium. So we know that sample, and the sample is the one we just got it now. We just got a new sample, we want to evaluate that. So we found the number of carbon atom. There are different methods for doing it. Spectrometry and all these things are involved in this, and divided by a decaying constant. The radioactive decay constant, a constant quantity of things from the C14 will be decayed. That number for the C14 is minus 0.693 is the constant, radioactive decaying constant of C14. So NF, which is mentioned as the sample that contains C14, and NO is also the living thing that we are taking it for the comparison, and the quantity of C4 also, C14 also is known. Now this will be divided with a constant called radioactive decay constant and will be multiplied with the number, the half-life. In the case of C14 it is 5730 years. After we finish this, we get a value that is the age of that particular fossil. So let me conclude the radioactive. So let me conclude the radiocarbon dating method, that carbon 14 is a radioactive carbon which is formed due to the combination of neutrons with nitrogen. So this C14 is radioactive, they will be present in the atmosphere, they will be absorbed by the plant because this C14 will combine with the oxygen to form radioactive carbon dioxide. After photosynthesis, this C14 will be inside the plant and animals will be consuming it, so this C14 will be inside the animals. When these animals are alive, the quantity of C14 inside and outside the atmosphere will be in an equilibrium, that will be same. But when the animal dies, the intake will stop, only the decaying will happen. So we know the half-life of an C14, that is 5730 years. That means by half of the time when comparing with the atmospheric C14, if it is half of the quantity is present inside, we can say that that particular sample is 5730 years old. Let us say comparing with the quantity in the atmosphere or a living organism, if we found the quantity of C14 is only 1/4 of the actual one, then we can say that that particular fossil is 11,460 years old. One more example. Let us say we are finding a sample which is only 1/8 of the quantity of, when we compare with the normal C14 level in the atmosphere, we can say that it is 17,190 years old sample we have in our hand. This is how we determine the age of fossils using C14 method, carbon dating method. So far what we have seen is carbon 14 and determination of age. But remember, carbon is not only the radioactive element present inside a living organism. You can still do the determination of age using carbon, uranium, lead as well as potassium. Of course, their half-life will be different than the carbon, that is the only thing. So the next one is, who has successfully made this radiocarbon dating technique is W.F. Libby in the year 1956. He just started this techniques, carbon dating. The next topic we are going to discuss is ethnobotany. That means study of regions, plants, practical use through traditional knowledge with the help of tribals. Of course, you know that traditional usage of plant we may not know, only the tribes may be knowing it. So getting us the knowledge from the tribals about the usage of plant for various diseases like diarrhea, snake bite, all the different situations of that kind. So getting the knowledge from the tribals, how can we use the medicinal plants against snake bite, diarrhea, diabetes, all these things. And coming to getting more information about the unknown uses is one of the major concern of ethnobotany. And also getting the knowledge of this, we can go for preparation of new medicine, herbal medicines by the studies of ethnobotany. And coming to the next one, and this is astrobiology. That means extraterrestrial life. Even the space agencies like NASA, ISRO, all these are in search of life apart from Earth. The minimum quality of a planet in solar system or anywhere else, we call them as Goldilocks zone to have a life in it. What is the meaning of Goldilocks? That means this particular planet should be away from the sun or that particular star in such a way that the water can exist in a liquid form. And the next condition is that planet should have enough mass to hold an atmosphere. And in our solar system itself, we have Mars. They have almost all these kind of things, and we are still searching the evidence of life in Mars. The NASA is planning, ISRO is planning, all these are space agencies are planning to find the life in Mars, because the Mars can have retains an atmosphere. Also, the presence of liquid water, they are still searching. If that is the case, organisms like extremophils, that means organisms that they live in extreme conditions, in the volcanic areas, under seawater, under huge pressure, where no sunlight is present, or extreme temperature, pressure, all these conditions, few microbes, organisms can be alive. So such type of organisms may be present there. That is what we are still searching. Extremophils, an example is Pyrophilus torridus. This organism is a thermoacidophile. That means this organism can live in extreme temperature as well as in acidic conditions. So this kind of extremophils may be present there in extraterrestrial life forms. That is what in search of. NASA is a space agency of United States of America. They are preparing an astrobiological research experimental program to the Mars by the end of 2020. So that means humans are still spending a lot of money and efforts to find out whether we have a neighbor. With this, we conclude this lesson, Origin and Evolution of Life. I'll be seeing you in the next lesson, and continue to pray for your family, yourself, and to the entire human society. Stay safe and stay at home. I'll be seeing you in the next lesson. Till then, goodbye.